This is the Left and Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage.
And I'm Nancy Richards.
Today we have really special guests. We have people who are just the best and the brightest and the most creative that Staten Island has to offer. I want to welcome to the podcast Susan Grabel, a local uh, artist, a member of the Staten Island Action Coalition. I want to welcome John Kilcullen of the Preservation League of Staten Island and Tamer Mahmoud also from the Preservation League of Staten Island. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So I guess I want to start with Susan. Susan, why don't you talk a little bit about what you've been doing recently in regards to with your work and your current exhibit that is coming up soon?
Yes, I have an exhibit up at a Series Gallery in Chelsea called Lost My Husband, Can't Lose My Country. And it's about my husband died 2 years ago. And so it's about the loss and the grieving of that. And in the midst of that, on top of that, is all the craziness that's been happening in the country and the stuff that, the Epstein files and ICE and the corruption that's happening. And also, I wanted to also put in the resistance because there's a strong resistance. Initially, I was going to call this "Lost My Husband, Lost My Country," but I couldn't. That was just too depressing. So, and I wanted to also just bring in all the resistance that's going on too. So there's a big module on No Kings, and what the exhibition is, I have the portrait reliefs in not corrugated, molded cardboard boxes. And they're scattered throughout. And there are these modules on the wall, like collage modules of images of what's going on and all the. I've been horrified by the Trump administration and the whole Republican enabling of him, and so there's also a module on the agencies that have been that are being decimated, the Social Security and FEMA, the Veterans Administration, and there's another module on the tariffs and prices. And I mean, I could have there are a million things that I wasn't able to put in that I didn't have time to like a room to put in, but that's what I'm doing. And I've always done social issues, and so this is just another way that I'm doing that, channeling my energies. So through my art, and I'm a member of the Staten Island Action Coalition, which has been very, very important to me in keeping me at least modestly sane through this craziness, and just gives me a way of also channeling me and doing something, because we went to some Democratic clubs, and I don't want to just sit around and talk. We need to, do things. So the Action Coalition is doing visibility brigades. We're doing leafleting, and we're doing like as corruption work. We're putting signs of corruption. This is corruption. This is corruption. They're doing postcarding and Maliotakis Mondays. You know, so all of these things came together in my work.
Absolutely.
And this is at Series Gallery in Chelsea, and it's on until the 25th of April.
Terrific. Well, one of the things that Nancy and I, when we started this podcast, one of the reasons why we started it is because we wanted to change perceptions of what Staten Island is. And so Staten Island is not all MAGA. Staten Island does have, despite any and all misconceptions, we do have a very vibrant, creative, and cultural scene. And so, John, I was wondering, you made some interesting points before we came on about what historic preservation means and just Staten Island's role in that.
Yes, thanks again. And as Susan was talking, and I was thinking about her gallery is an amazing space, so I encourage people to go check out the show. She's an amazing artist. Snug Harbor Cultural Center was saved probably one of the first historic sites on Staten Island to receive official landmark designation. And 60 years later, it is the hub of a lot of cultural, botanic, musical events, St. George Theater. So it really helps ground neighborhoods, and the principles and injustices that Susan is fighting for, kind of come from these neighborhoods that are historic, they're old, and historic preservation keeps these neighborhoods as where people want to live and create a mixed, diverse neighborhood. So there's not just one. And then you touched upon something, Andrew, is that it's not Staten Island is not a homogeneous MAGA island. It is very diverse, tip to tip. And the reputation is it's one thing, not what the folks on this podcast know about. So historic preservation, you just do it. It sort of it just lies below the surface. When Tamer and I talk, we're like, yeah, what are we going to do next to try to get the electeds? And it's just hammering away. And at the end of the day, you realize when someone says, oh, I love that building. Nancy gives walking tours and someone's, oh, I love this building. Oh, it's a landmark. Oh, great. It can stay there. And people, whether they vocalize it or they're ardent preservationists, I hear it all the time. Oh, I love that building. Oh, thank goodness it's still here. Oh, it's landmarked. Good. And when they see it's not landmarked, oh shoot, I didn't know it was not landmarked, and that's when everyone starts to scramble.
Yeah, well, the developers can come and do whatever they want, essentially, when it's not preserved as a landmark. Right. Go ahead, John. Were you going to say something?
I was just saying one of our current things, Bailey Seton. There's a lot of, and we've got on. Nancy was saying how Bay Street is changing. There's a lot of good things. Things are coming in. One of the current things that the league is working on, really, it's become our focus this year, is the Bailey Seton campus down in Rosebank at the corner of Vanderbilt and Bay. 2 landmark structures, serious state of disrepair, but they have so much adaptive reuse, plus open space, and the old 1930s hospital allows for, again, condos, affordable housing, gallery space. It creates this, and for folks who are listening and know the space, they go, oh, wow, why not put something here? Why not put that there? It comes up. Nancy was saying when you read blogs, time and time again, it comes up. Put it at Bailey Seton. Why can't it be there? Transit is nearby. It could promote bringing back a ferry. There was a ferry down in Clifton. So at the end of the day, historic preservation has tried and true reasons for preserving buildings. Look at the places in the rest of the city that people can't get in, but meaning the values have increased, but there's still these diverse neighborhoods in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens. So it's very important.
Absolutely. Tamer, you were talking about, the unique stories that are involved in historic preservation. Definitely say more about that, and definitely say more about the fact that Staten Island, despite being the forgotten borough in many senses, does have its own unique story and its own unique place in our history.
Of course, as I mentioned earlier on, and just to kind of piggyback on one key thing that was just discussed, the concept of change. Change is inevitable. Change is always going to happen. Sometimes it's for the better and sometimes it's for the worse. And my point of view as someone who's lived on Staten Island my entire life, I've seen both forms of change. I've seen negative change where we've seen numerous landmarks get erased, such as the old New Brighton Village Hall out in Lafayette.
Oh, yeah.
That was demolished. That was architecturally a beauty. Unfortunately, I believe, if I recall correctly, it was landmarked, but it was left in a state of decay, and ultimately it was demolished, and partly because it was neglected, demolition by neglect. So we lost that. We lost the old SR Smith Infirmary Hospital, also known as the Castle, on the intersection of Castleton and Zebra. Again, that had an amazing history. It was one of the first hospitals on Staten Island, and it's just we're constantly losing things. But on the bright side, change has been good. Look at Bay Street Landing. I mean, those three condos used to be warehouses for American Dry Dock back when there was investments being made in the piers and manufacturing was big and trade was big in New York City, and the piers were heavily used for international trade. I mean, thankfully those three specific structures were not demolished and were
Right.
readapted and converted to use into condominiums. And that's one of the very little success stories that unfortunately we happen, which is why it's important. And I often like to tell people preservation is more than just about landmarking and keeping structures and historical districts preserved and safe from demolition from developers. It's also about telling stories of things that are no longer with us. I mean, I strongly believe that the role of the Preservation League of Staten Island is to help tell those stories, tell the story of New Brighton Village Hall that used to be a seat of government when Staten Island was divided into different towns prior to the 1898 consolidation. Tell the story of the S.R. Smith Infirmary Hospital, which was one of the first hospitals on Staten Island, or in the case of Seaview Farm Colony, where the cure for tuberculosis was founded there. It's important to tell that story. And I actually had the privilege of going to the Staten Island Museum to check out the Black Angels exhibits. And I mean, I've known a little bit about the farm colony's history, but I was never aware of the history of the Black nurses that worked there. I was blown away by it. I was like, why is something like this? Why has it not been told before? Why was it, you know, kept in the dark? I mean, this is extremely important for people to understand the kind of history that Staten Island has played. I mean, Snug Harbor, its history goes all the way back to a couple of years after the founding of the Republic. Alexander Hamilton had to play a role in setting up Snug Harbor. He worked with Captain Robert Richard Randall in drafting up the legal paperwork for it. Not these little facts, these little tidbits of history. Not a lot of people know. They might know these landmarked and preserved sites, but they don't necessarily know that there's a story behind it. And one of the things that frustrates me to no end is as I, commute to Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and even the Bronx sometimes, I'll hear tons of stories. There's tons of literature, publications, articles, blogs, research available to talk about the various histories of these neighborhoods. But when it comes to Staten Island, you talk to people outside of Staten Island, not many people will often be able to know or understand the kind of history that Staten Island has to offer, which is sadly because of its reputation as a forgotten borough. And unfortunately, it has been forgotten from a historical perspective.
Um, I remember, I was a history major at the College of Staten Island, and I did my senior paper on WPA projects on Staten Island. And I remember going to do research, and there were very few bounded books on Staten Island after, I'm going to get the date wrong, but I believe it was 1929. They just there were no bounded, everything was primary. Nobody wrote any history books about Staten Island after 1929. There was a historian, Jung, I believe, who wrote the last bounded. We did have a borough historian. I do we still have a borough historian? I don't know. Did
I'm not sure. It
I
was
don't know.
Dick Dickerson was, and then
yeah.
I
I'm
know
blanking.
Tom Mateo was.
Tom Mateo. Thank you, Tamer. Yeah,
Okay.
I
All
think
right.
he
So
still is. It hasn't been reappointed, but and that just falls. As Tamer said, the league tries to pick up where some of that falls short.
Okay.
so
And Susan, I want to come back to you. So, in preparation for this podcast interview, I was reading a little bit about your story of grief and loss a few years ago. And your grief and loss was obviously a lot more personal. But I remember when the night of the 2024 election, actually, I was with Nancy and we were, drowning our sorrows. And I was sent home with a little birthday treat to help me sleep. But I, um, I I remember the profound sense of grief and loss that next day and in the weeks following.
Mhm.
Um, and so how did you get the, wherewithal to kind of not only with your own sense of personal grief for your husband's loss, but also from just the collective sense of dread that a lot of the country was feeling that day, to kind of channel it into what has become your exhibit?
Mhm. It's like, I mean, it's what I do. It's what I do with my feelings and with my concerns. I mean, that's what I've always done when I've seen issues that have concerned me. I did series on homelessness. I've done a series on aging women's bodies. You were talking about Snug Harbor. I curated a show a couple of years ago, called "Don't Shut Up," about how women's voices have been silenced and the need to raise and value women's voices. So, um, I always feel, I mean, it's what keeps me from going off the deep end, basically, is I channel my feelings and into my art. And the grieving process has been different than it might have been normally, because also my husband was political and we would be talking about all this stuff. And so, there I was, like, by myself with my head bouncing around with all the issues that are going on. So, um, and the Staten Island Action Coalition also. I feel like I need to do something when I'm feeling that way, or else I go crazy. So that's what I do, and I channel it into the art, and into my art and into curating. I've done curating also, which helps that.
So Susan, how long have you been working on this project that is currently it's
Uh,
currently up till the 25th, right? That's what you said.
right, right.
Yeah.
This project I've been working on for 3 years. The last show that I did was in 2023, and it was called, it was Reflections from the Pandemic. It was just, it was more like inward going, and feelings of soul searching and, and isolation. And I actually did 3 portraits in these molded cardboard boxes for that show. And I came upon the boxes kind of serendipitously, because I bought a new shredder and it had this great cardboard on either side. And they're wonderful structures. They're like architectural structures. And they had a natural hole in it. And so I decided to, what am I going to do with this? And I put the portraits in. Um, so I lost my train of thought for a minute. um, So anyway, so then from that, I continued to, after 2023. I had put out a call to friends about the molded cardboard, and so I was getting all this molded cardboard on my porch and my at the gallery. People were leaving it for me, and so I started to do more of the portraits. And then as George was sick, and after he died, they became a little different. They were um, partly hidden, fragmented, um, uh, you know, um, so I mean, I was working on that, and then feeling that I had to do something with what was going on, politically. So I decided to do this, and it was an interesting project because it's different than other shows I've had. Other shows I've just done this, the work, the sculpture, and then I put it out. But this was actually an on-site installation, because there was no way that I could duplicate the gallery space in my studio. So I did these different modules about different issues. So as I said before, on ICE, on the Epstein files, on No Kings, on corruption, on the tariffs and the money that we're spending on billionaires, giving tax cuts to billionaires and not and cutting, medical care. So that's, so it's been ongoing for about 3 years. In the beginning, it was hard to find pictures, actually. Like, I was starting to do stuff on ice and there wasn't as much available, but as I kept working
Well,
on
now
it, they
it's
became
plenty.
more
Yeah.
available. Yeah,
Yeah, now there's plenty. Of course,
I know.
you won't see any of their faces because they're still masked. But yeah.
Yeah. So, so that's what I was doing. I would make it, a particular module about, about one issue. And they're all put up with all their photographs. Some of them are Photoshop collages, and some of them are photographs, that I kind of off the internet, and I blow them up, and they're all put up with push pins. So it is like an on-site installation. But I
I
will.
know that I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say I know that a lot of this is, like the loss of your husband. Um, in regards to are there any touchings of references to Staten Island? Um, in like, well, I mean, you and your husband lived on Staten Island. But in regards to the modules, like when you're talking about ice, or do any of these things have like reference to like ice on Staten Island, or um, you know,
Not ice particularly, but yes, I mean, I have some images of the Visibility Brigade stuff. Believe the women, grab them by the Epstein files. And then I have a module on corruption. And we did for Staten Island Action Coalition, we did this corruption walk with we had signs about the jet that, the Qatar jet that Trump took,
yeah.
and the pay for play administration that they have, donors, and then they get contracts for the stuff. So we did this corruption walk by Borough Hall, and it was photographed. It is a video. It's on our website, and I think it's on YouTube.
Oh, I've seen it.
So
It's
there's a
really
picture of
powerful.
all
Yeah.
of us with the signs, and then what image what that's related to, and then the No Kings module. There's there are pictures of our No Kings March, and also with Staten Island Action Coalition had and I know what, poster day. We made posters at Makerspace, so I have a picture of those. So yeah, Staten Island is very much in the whole thing.
Narrative. So, which, like, I guess throwing this to all three of you, I think when we think of Staten Island, we don't see it as an activist uh borough, I think, in somewhat. I mean, disagree with me if you want, but or do you see it as an activist borough? And I think in your exhibit that's being held in Chelsea, it's interesting that when people look, they'll see that a lot of these references are on from Staten Island, which I think are important in regards to you know, how we're never thought of in the bigger picture of New
Right,
York City, or not
right,
never thought of, but not thought of as often, or
right.
people have certain perceptions of who we are as people.
I know, and also, I mean, people, I always tell people about, that we have a very vibrant art community on Staten Island. It's a close knit community, and it's very vibrant. Snug Harbor is a hub now, but we have had over the years different galleries. Actually, I mean, years ago in the 1970s when I first came here, we had galleries. There were co-op galleries on Bay Street,
Mhm.
near Broad Street. Um, so I always tell people about that, and now a lot of it's centered on Snug Harbor. But we had the gallery Staten Island Arts had a gallery at Irby, and there was Staten Island Creative Community had a gallery on Bay Street, and then on Richmond Terrace. So and the Noble Collection and the Alice Austin House. We have a lot of art spaces on Staten Island. Not enough. I mean, we don't have enough galleries. We can't seem to sustain galleries here. And of course, our culturals are grossly underfunded.
Well,
But I think that Snug Harbor is finally starting to, come into his own more. I mean, it's in much better shape than years ago, when we first started. So, um, that's been nice.
absolutely. John, what do you to build
Yeah,
up
no,
the
I
what do you
with listening to Susan and knowing what she does, and we share a lot of the overlap in friends and colleagues. And what Nancy said, it isn't an activist borough on the surface, but it very much is. And I'm looking at all of us here who are involved in so many things outside of this and outside of the things we're talking about. But the two completely dovetail. All the work that Susan said in terms of where the galleries were, those are so historic. So they've stayed like that. So it's the work she's doing now and the groups are so important. The work we're doing, and I'm not patting ourselves on the back. It's just that there's only one preservation group. There are not multiple activist groups like Susan's and all the friends. Like, it's a small group and they really make a loud voice. And I think to us degree, Tamer, his work out off the borough, raising the awareness of Staten Island that we have things to protect. We have a great history. We have art. Snug Harbor struggles. We all know that. We all support it. But we can't let up the momentum. It could easily fall off the wayside because, sadly, I like to say the South Shore homogeneous tendencies could just envelop, and we would just be a 100% bedroom community to the other boroughs.
Tamer?
I strongly believe that Staten Island is and has been, is, and will continue to be an activist borough. It has a strong history of activism dating back to revolutionary times. Staten Islanders were quite adamant in making sure that we didn't have a quarantine here in Staten Island, or in what is now roughly around the area that is the Lighthouse Depot today. They burned it down, but they say if we took out all the people, that's one example of Staten Islanders making their voices heard. When New York City was coming together under the 1898 consolidation, Staten Islanders they were operating on both sides of the spectrum. You had those against consolidation, you had those for consolidation. Strong civic pride at that time. A lot of people wanted to get consolidation for Staten Island in order to benefit from city services, whereas those who didn't want it were afraid that Staten Island would just be, forgotten. And in a sense, in the long run, they were partly correct on that end. There was activism when it came to the issue with the landfill that dated back to the 40s and 50s when it was first proposed and when it was first opened. That was an activism that lasted almost half a century until 2001 when it was 2000 or 2001 when it was closed down. You had the secessionist movement of the 90s. So Staten Islanders have always been at the forefront when it comes to activism. They've been very civically engaged, very civically involved. And Staten Island is one thing I learned from, the couple of years that I've been involved in the community. Staten Islanders are not afraid to make their voices heard as loud as possible to get attention from the mayor. I think we need to continue to be adamant. We need to continue raising our voices, and we need to continue making it known loud and clear to any mayor, any city administration that comes in that we too have needs that need to be met. We too have sites that need to be preserved. We too have a story that needs to be told just like all the other boroughs, and we need to get our fair share of representation when it comes to citywide affairs.
Well, also Staten Island activists were very, active in preventing Moses from putting that highway through the Greenbelt. And they finally had to decommission that exit. It took a long time, but they did, and they said that they couldn't put the highway. What's the name of that group again? I don't remember. My mind is going.
The people who Staten Island Greenbelt Association. That group.
But what's the name? I know that Herman Zaga was involved with the group.
I remember him from CSI. But
was it Dick Bugler?
That rings a bell.
Yes.
So
I believe
there was like a whole
name
group
involved with
that did that. Yeah.
So
I mean, we've been, back activists have been important in preserving green space here.
Tamer, you just reminded me of something.
Sorry, it's the protectors of Pine Oak Woods.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I couldn't
That's
find
Mm.
my
They used
unmute
to give
button. Sorry.
walks. Yeah, the great walks. Tammy, you reminded me of something. My father was part of the Staten Island secessionist group, and I recently came across some of his correspondence to the Advance. He was an avid letter writer. I never knew this, and he kept all of his letters. I need to like give them to someone. And I remember always disagreeing with him because I was a city worker and going, we have so many
I
civil
don't want
servants on this island. Like,
I don't want to
Mhm.
be the
why would
Staten
we want
Island
to leave?
Department. Yeah. I don't want to be the Staten Island Department of Education. I like my pension and stuff. Yeah.
right.
But I just found them recently, and I was reading them. And it's from the 90s, so you just brought that up. So, they're interesting. And now I know some people are looking to bring it back, but he was one of them. It was
Yeah,
weird.
it's actually interesting that this has always been the debate about whether we want to stay a part of New York City or we want to just kind of go off and do our own thing. And, at certain points it's come back up and it's had momentum and, then it sort of dies down. Um, and it's interesting to learn that there were, at the foundation of the city, there was still, that tension. I always joke with my students that Staten Island, and it was a very loyalist colony to the British.
Well,
I always joke with them that, we've always been kind of this way, a little bit.
we've always been a kind of rebel borough in some way or another. Like if the city is going this way, we're going that way.
And yeah, 100%. And Tamer mentioned it's the country's 250th this year. And of all the boroughs that did not, or counties that did not sign the declaration, Richmond County was one of them. We were a Tory stronghold. So you were 100%. I mean, the island mentality has just pervaded 250 years later. So you're
I
100%
I
right.
actually, I actually forgot to mention one important thing. I recently read this book called Staten Island and the Subway, and I believe it was published by Kenneth Gold. And it was by,
Former
I
professor,
strongly,
my former
yes,
professor, Ken
I,
Gold.
s-
Yeah.
it's an amazing book. I strongly recommend everyone here and everyone who's listening to the show to consider reading it. I'm amazingly enough, and that's actually where I learned a little bit more about Staten Island, so historic activist movements. But it was surprising to understand that one of the many reasons that Staten Island joined New York City as one of the five boroughs was the promise of getting a subway from Staten Island to Brooklyn.
Mm.
And it was really interesting just to read through that history, read through like those 30 some odd years where Staten Islanders fought tirelessly and advocated strongly for a subway connection between Staten Island and Brooklyn. And even then, Staten Islanders were not even united in that fight. You had various degrees of differentiated opinions as to where the tunnel should be, where it should be located on the Staten Island and the Brooklyn end. Should it be freight only? Should it be rail only, passenger only? Should it be a combination of the two? Who should we get support from, the Port Authority of New York or the city? There was all these debates that splintered the movement, and ultimately, because of the division within Staten Island communities, because of course the city didn't pay much attention to Staten Islanders, and of course for a wide array of political, socioeconomic reasons, we never obviously got the subway. And it was one of the key theses that was discussed in the book was not getting a subway a key reason for how Staten Island evolved into what it is today, sort of that separate mentality from the rest of the city. Ken Gold did an amazing work analyzing, population increases between Staten Island and the rest of the city, pre-consolidation, at consolidation, and post-consolidation. They looked at job development, and you do notice as you read that with time, Staten Island just sort of diverged from the rest of New York City and evolved into its own unique character. And Ken Gold posits that partly was because we didn't get the subway, which did not allow for greater development of Staten Island, for greater industry to come to Staten Island. It was really a very unique way of looking at it. And I was able to walk away kind of getting a better understanding as to why Staten Island is the way it is. And it's just amazing how you got to look back in history, which again is it goes back to a lot of what I was saying about storytelling is you want to tell these stories to people so that they could understand Staten Island. And I thought that was just an amazing look of history.
Yeah, well, I often draw upon history just to, explain to people why we're like this sometimes. Like I said, it's not all of us. This is, why we're like, what you see in the media sometimes. So I always draw upon those moments in history to really ground it.
Today, I actually on Instagram, I don't know who the person was, made a post about that tunnel that was never built. It's there.
Mhm.
There's a park over like near like 57th Street in Brooklyn, and there's like some hidden vents, but there is a tunnel like partially built over there. And then they had a proposed to go. There's like two proposals, and there was an inauguration on Staten Island by the mayor of the city at that time, and it never. That just came on my Instagram today, so that's so interesting you said that. So.
But I think that I think it was supposed to come up somewhere near Ward Hill as it rose there, sort of up Victory and Terminus. The terminus would have been there. But I think in listening, I think where Staten Island is today, I find more people are leaning into its uniqueness as of today, given all the things that didn't happen and the things we love about Staten Island today. And I think we're leaning into that while also being cognizant of the rest of the city and not thinking we're apart and we're like this lofty island. I find that in my historic, when I do the historic preservation part of me, I'm finding that people they like it. They want some change, but they don't want to become a Manhattan or a Brooklyn, which crowding and high costs come with that. And sadly, we're getting there and cost wise, but still, it's less crowded, and you can still have art, culture, history, all close to the rest of the city, what the city has to offer.
Absolutely.
One of the
Yes.
things that I also the uniqueness about Staten Island and is I find as an artist, the Staten Island Arts Coalition getting like grants, I find I don't want to say easier, but I find more accessible. I think going to workshops to learn about grant writing and getting to know who our local representatives are. I have a much easier time doing that on Staten Island in regards to getting information. As a teacher in Brooklyn, it was much more difficult to kind of make those connections, like with our elected officials and with the arts community. Yeah, it just seemed more difficult. But here, it seems like as an artist um, and as an activist, I have much more access to people and information. So,
Yeah. And the
Yeah,
6 degrees
I
of
have found
separation.
that also. Sorry. I found that also a lot, that it is easier to get grants here. And also, I mean, some of it is just like, because it's a smaller community. And after a while, you've been here for a while, you know people. And I was able to curate a big exhibition. I said before, don't shut up. It's not clever. I wouldn't have been able to do that at the Brooklyn Museum, you know. But I was able to do that here. So yeah, there is in in some ways more opportunities, and that whatever opportunities there are more accessible. I think that's very true.
And the successes, that is so true. In terms of the historic preservation, in the art world, you stand out more because there's fewer options. When we do a walking tour, Tamer brings people. Oh, I didn't know that. So we change minds, not masses, but we change minds. When people came to your shows, they're like, "Oh wow, this is so amazing." The other boroughs, there's so much that you might miss, as you said, Susan.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I, definitely wanted to touch upon with all of you is, obviously we're facing enormous threats to our democracy. I think there's no question about that. And you see some of it in the more obvious ways, voter suppression. You see a lot of, masked men on the streets, as in Susan's exhibit, just picking people up randomly, and the destruction of institutions and agencies. And historic preservation to me has always been something that's neglected and underfunded, and nobody really pays attention to it. But now we have an administration that is actively defiling a lot of our historic landmarks, the White
Funding
House
public
included.
television. So
Yeah, the White House
Yeah.
included. I mean, tearing down the East Wing, not to
Yep.
mention the, tacky Liberace slash Uday and Qusay Hussein decor that he's gotten there now. But uh, it's just, and so there's not a lot of respect for our institutions or our history at all from this administration. They could give a
Or
fuck
any
about.
history. I mean,
Yeah.
No.
they're wiping, all kinds of information from websites.
Yeah.
Anything that doesn't go along with, I don't know, with Trump world.
100%. And yes, I was thinking of the Philadelphia National Monument that the city had
with
to fight.
Washington.
No, in Philadelphia by the Liberty, about the enslaved people in colonial Philadelphia. The city fought the National Park Service. They had wiped out the reference to slavery, but they were able to prevail, and the administration had to reinstall them. So as Susan said, they're just wiping these things, thinking no one's going to say anything, and they're like, no pun intended, they're whitewashing history. Not pun intended. They are.
Really.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, John. I mean, it's kind of taking us, we're kind of going back in time to the old nativist sentiments that, existed in the 19th century. And it's sickening, to be quite frank, to see all this happen. I mean, we as a society have fought long and hard to get to where we are at today, that, and not even, I mean, the dude's not been in office for 2 years and he's already managed to deconstruct and really wipe out a lot of the progress that took decades to accomplish.
Without a doubt. I think we collectively have run out of things to say or express, because each day
There's something new.
it falls harder and lower than we thought it could ever go.
There's no bottom. There's no bottom at all.
Yeah, and Tamer and everyone, I just thought of now, like the attack on religion, and it's the Pope, and these things are like, you would never in your wildest mind having different cabinet members saying things and supporting what the president said against a religious figure. And you're losing church and state. I mean, we all remember we were in grade school, church and state. That's what the colonists fought for. To the Quakers, the Mormon, they all came over for religious freedom, and it's now being like just saying no. That's not what It doesn't. It can't fly now.
Well, I know, but what's really crazy now is that they've been promoting this, like evangelical, view, white nationalist Christian view, but now they're fighting with the Christians. I mean, with the Catholics. I mean, that's like, I mean, that's like totally nuts. They can't even get that straight.
JD Vance, that couch fucker, is telling the Pope like how to be Catholic.
He's telling the Pope to keep away from theology.
Stay in your lane. I mean, it was. I didn't know what to say when he was lecturing to a group about the Pope.
Well, in a very small room, to be fair, it was a very sparsely attended.
Right.
TV
Still,
event.
It got a lot of press.
Yeah. Well, and I think just as a small victory, I think we could take after many months of going back and forth with the federal government, the pride flag is staying at Stonewall. it is staying at Stonewall. They gave in, they backed down, and the community in that area, in the West Fourth Street, West Village area, I know just my friend Eric Botcher is the state senator there. They were really vocal about it. They protested basically every week, and they gave in a few days ago. So it's going to stay there, knock on wood.
Mhm.
Well, didn't they change the website on the National Park
Yes.
Service?
Yes.
They
Yeah,
did.
well, they
They
erased trans people. They erased trans people from
Right.
that history, even though it was this,
But-
even though they were the ones at Stonewall who led the whole charge.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It-
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they're erasing women's accomplishments from a lot of the websites and people of color. The whole crazy assault on what they consider DEI when
Oh yeah.
diversity is what's made this country great. It's what
Oh
made this
yeah.
country beautiful. It's what contributed to the creativity, the innovation of everything that's going on.
No, you're
So,
right. And I hate to say it, but he's doing a heck of a job holding a lot of corporations hostage to, his political will. I mean, companies now
mhm,
can't engage in merger and acquisition without having to pander to his policies just in order
mhm,
to, merge together, or companies can't,
mhm,
uh, you know, continue with business as usual without having to succumb to his whims, which is really scary to say the least. That someone like him, a president, who a decade or two ago, I never thought would have seen this happen, could now literally control economic discourse, nonetheless political, but even economic discourse, how companies functions, what they can and cannot do. It's very scary.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
also the media. I mean, his control of the media.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
some kind of fascist, kleptocratic, you know,
Mhm,
economy. I mean, I expect CNN, now that it's been acquired by Paramount and the Ellisons, to be,
mhm,
One America News pretty soon. Like I
right.
expect that, to be his version of Pravda, essentially.
Yeah.
But luckily there are still those outlets that you can see the spark is still burning, and they're calling and asking the questions. And that gives me hope when I see those things.
Mhm,
Okay, they're not just rolling over.
right.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
also, I mean, people are protesting all across the country. Millions of people are protesting, or out in the streets, and so that's really important. And the
Eh,
fact that we actually are having a reasonably large activist community on Staten Island, is a
Mhm.
big thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny to say this, but we got to give the judges of the Supreme Courts and the various district courts props. I
Yep.
mean, they're the real MVPs right now. I mean, they're literally what's holding up a lot of the things that make the most sense for the American people. Albeit there've been some
Well,
rulings to his favor.
The Supreme Court, it like depends on like what fucking day it is. Like honestly,
Yeah, it,
it really
it
depends.
does.
Like
It does.
I wish they would have let us redistrict, for God's sakes.
I
Like
know.
let
I
us
know.
let us redistrict. And and they
Yeah,
also basically legalize racial profiling with the Kavanaugh rule
Mhm.
with ICE.
I know.
And
I
I
know. No, there's
yeah,
been some defeats. There's been some
yeah.
defeats, and there's been some rulings I'm not by any means happy with. But there's also
Well, you're right. The
on the flip
judiciary as
side,
a whole, yeah, the
yeah,
judiciary as a whole has been the one thing that's been a
yeah, they've
teeny
kept them at
guardrail.
bay to a degree,
Teeny
as much as
guardrail. Teeny
yeah.
guardrail. Yeah.
But throughout also, I mean, the lower courts have been good in a lot of ways. A lot of the lower courts,
Mhm.
and they've overturned a lot of the stuff that he's doing. So I mean, he does this crazy stuff, but then people are resisting, and they're suing, and they are winning. So we are winning a lot of battles actually across the country,
And
and we're winning a lot of elections. Let's not forget that.
absolutely. We're making a comeback, I think, a little bit. And I think in
Yeah.
November we're gonna have a Hungary moment. I think we're gonna, finally take back, democracy.
Mhm.
We have to show up. So,
Yeah.
I always feel that if enough people show up, um, we do create change. And I feel that people who stay home, I can always tell, like at my uh, where I vote on Staten Island, if it's crowded, we're going to see a swing. And if it's not, if it's just normal, if it's not crowded, we're not. I find, so people need to come out and vote in November, most definitely.
That's a big push that we have to make in the next few months, is like getting Staten Island Coalition. We're doing a lot of voter registration also in everything that we do. Getting more people registered, and it's going to be really important to get people. I mean, you're right in terms of this stops when enough people say no. I mean, that's what happened in Hungary, and that's what they say have been happening in any overturning of a authoritarian regime, is that when enough people say no, it stops.
Absolutely. And I just, as one of our final questions here, and this goes to all of you. So how do we, how would you advise artists, historians, creative people, and people who are committed to preserving arts and culture? How do you advise that they go forward in this moment in history?
That they do what? I'm sorry.
How they go forward. How they go forward. Tamer just mentioned the fact that many elements of our society are under attack now. They have their hands in basically everything. And so how do you keep going in the face of all of this? And that's to all of you.
I'll go. I think, as Tamer said a couple times, and I 100% agree, our history, we can't let bad history repeat itself. And what we're seeing is it's happening. I hate the Nazi regime and just erasing history. It's there. It's already happening. And what Susan said, the roles and data and this, we just have to remind people that a building that is there, Bailey Seton, I'll wrap that up. Bailey Seton was the first public health hospital on Staten Island, Seaman's Retreat, where merchant Marines would get their health care. Joseph Kinian, Dr. Joseph Kinian, discovered the cholera bacteria and then was able to do an inoculation for it. That's history. That's national history that gives, what Tamer said, Staten Island its uniqueness. It didn't happen in Brooklyn, didn't happen in Manhattan. So I tell people, that's what I tell them. And I say, be proud of where you're from. I see young people when I do talk to them, oh, wow, I didn't know, because they don't. And I think you're talking about tearing down the East Wing. There could be people who grow up not knowing an East Wing. God forbid we don't repair it or do something. So it's really important to keep bringing that message out there.
Yeah, well, and also just to build on the East Wing stuff, he's also building a Nazi Handmaid's Tale like arch too somewhere. So
that's
yeah,
and he's alive, and it's distorting memorials. And he did the Kennedy Center, which relates to arts. He's trying to just
put his name on it,
on anything and everything.
Well, because he knows, and his niece Mary, actually, she made a good point. She knows if he doesn't put his name on anything, nobody else will, because he's such a
and he's grabbing for things.
That's so true. So here's, in honor of the 250th anniversary of our country, he's making coins up with his photograph on it. What's that going to do with the anniversary?
Right.
So
it doesn't, has nothing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And Andrew, as you said, he knows that no one will do this. No one will rally to do it after he dies soon, or hopefully.
We might create a dance in his name. So
yeah,
you never know. That's what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to let the other two go, but protocol and tradition have been literally thrown out and bulldozed with the White House. So I'll let my colleagues go.
Just one quick recommendation for people. I strongly recommend that anyone and everyone get a copy of Gods of New York and read it. It talks about New York City, the making of New York City from 1986 to 1990. you'll kind of start to get a better understanding of how this guy Trump really evolved into what it is, what he is today. Because a lot of the roots of his interesting behavior really has its start here in New York City, and I'm gonna leave it at that. But strongly recommend it. But John, to piggyback off what you said regarding Bailey Seton, let's not forget about Lighthouse Depot. I mean, Lighthouse Depot was where they made the buoys, where they did maintenance work for all the various lighthouses around the country, the lighting, the Fresnel lens, the productions, etc. I mean, that's a national monument. It's not
Correct.
just a Staten Island specific monument. It's national. It played a national role. I mean, that's something again that
Right.
was done only on Staten Island, not in Brooklyn, not in Queens, the Bronx, or Manhattan, only on Staten Island.
And yeah, you're right.
And I think, I mean, one thing I always, when it comes to history, is I always keep telling people, keep studying history. I'm a member of the Lower East Side Tenement Museum in Manhattan. I've been on every single one of their tours, huge fan of their programming. I'm part of a book club, and I just love the Tenement Museum. I love it because it doesn't do that whole whitewashing nonsense that we're seeing now. It's like one of those few museums that actually is doing great work in really telling the true story of America, that it was a nation built on immigrants. It talks about the history of various immigrant families that lived in 93 Orchard Street and 97 Orchard Street. And it really ties a lot of themes together. You see discrimination, you see the struggle to survive, you go through different panics and depressions, and life was not easy for these immigrants and for the various children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren of immigrants today who on social media are often the first ones to tell you to go back where you came from. I think it's extremely important to really study immigrant history because let's kind of keep it real. I mean, we're all
Immigrants.
children, grandchildren, great grandchildren,
Immigrants.
immigrants, and to keep it politically correct, all of them came here illegally. You know, that's how I like to look at it. Everyone came here illegally. No one had passports. No one had papers. No one applied for visas. You had people crossing borders left and right for the same reasons that the immigrants come here today to escape persecution, for better opportunities, and really for themselves and for their children, and in some cases even grandchildren. So I always tell people, go back and study history, really study it. Go to museums like the Tenement Museum, go to various cultural institutions, and learn a little bit about our past because there's a lot of, just as there's the bad, there's always good things that you can extract from it and really help understand why immigration is so important. And that's why I love history. And that's why I always go back to saying it's important to preserve our history and to tell it for what it is, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it's all what makes us what we are today.
I
Susan?
wanted to just go back on what John was saying about educating people about what's going on. I mean, that's what Staten Island Action Coalition's about, mainly and that's what I've been doing through my art, and that's what artists can do. I mean, to help to you know, because a lot of people, they just go about their lives and they don't know what the larger situation is, and they don't want to know. So I think it's important to get that information out, and artists can do it in a lot of creative ways. I mean, and at the No Kings, we did it. We had some performance there. We had music. We had good people doing really interesting posters to get people to pay attention to what's happening.
Absolutely. Nancy, do you have anything else?
Well, I just wanted to say in regards to like for myself being a tour guide, Staten Island Discovery Tours does walking tours if they want to learn history. John, you give tours, I know. And if people look I know there's tours of, in Snug Harbor and there is so much history here on the island and there is so much culture. Staten Island arts. There is um like in regards to Sandy Ground, like there's a push right now to kind of to keep that afloat. There is a lot of issues in regards to maintaining that. Um, we have this wonderful history aside from what people might see on a TikTok, going to, there's more to us, and that's the main reason why we started this podcast. And I'm glad that there are people like yourselves out there promoting art and preserving history of Staten Island and being active, and thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well,
Thank
and
you.
on that note, this is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. Thank you, Susan Grabel. Thank you, John Kilcullen, and thank you, Tamer Mahmoud, for joining us today and giving us your perspectives and sharing your artistic and cultural genius with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage,
And I'm Nancy Richards.
and we'll see you next week.
Yes.